Ladies and gentlemen, put some clothes on for God's sake. You're on the radio now. And while you're at it, doll yourselves up a little, because we're going out tonight. We're going way out. We're going out on a limb of explanation. We're taking a deep dive into the world of the doll and all its darker, delicious, disturbing, and deeper meanings. You're listening to CILU 102.7 FM in the shadow of the sleeping giant, and it's the Valley of the Dolls today on Northern Ontario's most peculiar program. I'm Layman Pascal, an alien who just arrived on this planet and is fascinated by the humans.
Gotta get up, gotta get out, gotta get home before the morning comes. What if I'm late? Got a big day, gotta get home before the sun comes up. Up and away, got a big day, sorry can't stay. I gotta run, yeah. Gotta get home, pick up the phone, gotta let the people know I'm gonna be late. There was a time when we could dance until 9:45. We never thought it would end then. We never thought it would end. We used to carry on and drink and do the rock and roll. We never thought we'd get older. We never thought we'd grow cold. But now, gotta get up, gotta get out, gotta get home before the morning comes. What if I'm late? Got a big day, gotta get home before the sun comes up. Up and away, got a big day, sorry can't stay. I gotta run, yeah. Gotta get home, pick up the phone, gotta let the people know I'm gonna be late. Down by the sea, she knew a sailor who'd been to war. She never even knew a sailor before. She never even knew his name. He'd come to town and he would pound it for a couple of days, and then he'd sail across the bubbling waves, and those were happier days. But now, gotta get up, gotta get out, gotta get home before the morning comes. What if I'm late? Got a big day, gotta get home before the sun comes up. Up and away, got a big day, sorry can't stay. I gotta run, yeah. Gotta get home, pick up the phone, gotta let the people know I'm gonna be late.
The Carrie Nation singing for the first time on television. Find it.
The music, I mean, the Carrie Nation. I mean, what a great name. And also, Find It. And my favorite is when they're driving across the country, singing with a superimposed over the map. Oh, it's beyond good. They're sort of like the Mamas and the Papas or something. When you hear them now, they're good, kind of. They're great in a way. It's just like they're so ludicrous when you see them and when somebody's spinning that shot where he's spinning the color wheel. I used to see Andy Warhol spin that same color wheel at the Dom on St. Mark's Place when they were showing Chelsea Girls. And Velvet Underground was singing on stage. So all that stuff kind of happened, but not like that. They took it to L.A. and went beyond the valley, right? But yet, I play the album all the time, and I love the title song. Beyond the Valley of the Dolls sounds to me like a Douglas Sirk theme, like Imitation of Life, really. That's what it sounds like, that kind of...
The first track you heard was Harry Nilsson's Gotta Get Up, the opening theme song for the Netflix series called Russian Dolls. Fun fact, the program Russian Dolls was recommended to me personally by our station manager, Tiana Flaonk. Odd pronunciation, but she insists on it. After that, you heard legendary filmmaker John Waters expressing some of his feelings about Russ Meyer's less serious sequel to The Valley of the Dolls, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Valley of the Dolls was a 1967 American film based on a novel of the same name about pretty young American women trying to make their way in the world while struggling with drug addiction and bad relationship choices. The word dolls in the movie is used as slang for the drugs, but it also refers to the women themselves, who are rendered somewhat doll-like, not only by the way they dress and look to fit into the magazine-fueled commercial American society, but also by the painkillers, opiates, and amphetamines they take, which makes them seem variously like sedate or hyperactive toys, rather than real human beings.
You've got to climb Mount Everest to reach the Valley of the Dolls. It's a brutal climb to reach that peak. You stand there, waiting for the rush of exhilaration, but it doesn't come. You're alone. And the feeling of loneliness is overpowering.
A lot of that old Valley of the Dolls consumer culture from the 1940s and 50s presented women and men as kind of plastic shells, humanoids that dress up and fit into the American dream. But their inner sensitivity, complexity, and creativity is mysteriously missing at times. You can still find this kind of simplified doll people in the advertising of many other countries around the world, where conformity, symbolism, and standardized dress-up, the art of keeping face and avoiding trouble, has not yet been replaced by the art of individualism, self-authoring, and the endless open-ended pursuit of personally satisfying quality of life, which is the ostensible goal of both capitalism and socialism, I'm led to believe. Of course, the West has changed since that time. It underwent some kind of partial transformation in the 1960s so that now we're marketed to as strong, proud, creative individuals who challenge convention, invent our own reality, and live for pleasures and adventures and have idiosyncratic family choices. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether that's a real step forward or just another kind of conformity for new kinds of dolls. Speaking of new kinds of dolls, what sorts of dolls are there? Russian dolls, nesting dolls, voodoo dolls, ventriloquism dummies, androids who look like people, rubber full-size sex dolls, Barbie dolls, Ken dolls, superhero action figures, although sometimes boys don't like to call those dolls, attractive women and nice women from the 1930s, baby dolls, and of course the large, creepy, clown-like dolls that get up in the night and run through the house, terrifying you. What do all these have in common? Mohi, mohi, mohi. M-O-H-E spells mohi. Manufactured ornamental humanoid exoskeletons. That's what a doll really is, right? I know it sounds strange. No one ever said it before, but think about it slowly. A doll is artificial, artificially produced. It is for play or decoration or attractiveness. It resembles a person, but only on the outside. A manufactured ornamental humanoid exoskeleton. We could call it an artificial decorative anthropomorphic facade, but that doesn't spell mohi. Now, I know you're wondering about the word humanoid. What about a cow? Could a cow be a doll? Well, sort of, but only sort of. Of course, you could have a toy cow, a toy car, a toy dog, but these lean a little to the toy side and not as much to the doll side, except insofar as they might be props in the dollhouse where human dolls live and have cars and dogs and cats and cows. Certainly a toy dolphin or a giraffe might seem like a doll if it's made roughly the same way that your humanoid doll is, and maybe you keep them all on the same shelf. And maybe you have a humanoid with a giraffe head and a long neck. That's weird, but it still reminds you of a human. It doesn't have to be human, that's why I said humanoid. And we're dealing with a veneer, a facade, an exoskeleton. Like if the makeup on a clown jumped off and the human being, like a clown's makeup, jumps right off the clown and starts walking around hollow on the inside and ends up in your own child's bedroom. An evil, creepy facade with nothing on the inside. But meant to be lovely, meant to be entertaining. The thing about facades is we don't know what's inside them. That's part of the reason most people find clowns to be scary and confusing, because they have emotion on their face that doesn't tell you about the state of the internal human being. That's what face emotions are supposed to tell you. And suddenly there's a hole in your understanding of the situation, just like there's a hole in the center of the doll. But not necessarily. You just don't know with facades. A very attractive, nice person, even a person with a lot of character or inner beingness, whatever that is, might still doll themselves up to go out. On the other hand, if you cut open a squishy plastic child's doll, you will find only a hollow, empty space inside. Maybe there's something under the facade, and maybe there isn't. If you refer to a woman as a doll and she's not yet justified in accusing you of thinking of her as merely a hollow object decorated to please the male gaze, that remains yet only one of the possibilities. Dolls are agnostic. They don't tell us whether there's something inside or not. Both a void and a full person can be dolls. And Russian dolls amplify this ambiguity because what isn't in them is a hollow space containing another doll, and its missing contents contain yet another doll. A finite sequence, of course, but one that suggests an infinite regression into the flatness of circular time. But at the so-called same time, it suggests there might be a treasure within all that. Inside the heart of a Russian nesting doll is a good place to hide a jewel or a key or a shining discovery about the meaning of all things. This nested quality of the show Russian Dolls is what lends itself to TV. TV is excellent with loops of time, series, and seasons. Loops of time and reality seem to occupy the same space, and no one knows if it's merely a surface simulation over hollowness or if there's something real underneath. Like Groundhog Day, we wonder what's in the center of the loop. Hollow like a donut, or does it hide a deeper resonant meaning of self and relationship, mutuality, and the transformation of emotion? Guys and Dolls, on the other hand, is a 1955 musical starring Marlon Brando, Gene Simmons, and Frank Sinatra as a gambling addict named Nathan Detroit. It's based on a musical theater piece which in turn was based on the 1930s short stories of Damon Runyon, who used goofy slang language, or slangwage, from the period. Dolls in this case means all the women who either speak slangwage or are being referred to by a slanguinarian.
I got the horse right here, the name is Paul Revere, and here's a guy that says if the weather's clear, can do. This guy says the horse can do. If he says the horse can do.
I'm picking Valentine, 'cause on the morning line, the guy's got him figured at 5 to 9.
But make it efforts half, he wins it by a half, according to this here in the Telegraph.
For Paul Revere I'll bite, I hear his foot's all right. Of course it all depends if he read last night.
I know it's Valentine, the morning works look fine. You know the jockey's brother's a friend of mine.
And just a minute, boys, I got the feedbox noise. It says the great-grandfather was equipoised.
I told you, Paul Revere, now this is no bum steer. It's from a handicapper that's real sincere.
I'm picking Valentine, 'cause on the morning line, the guy's got him figured at 5 to 9.
So make it efforts half, he wins it by a half, according to this here in the Telegraph. Epitaph.
Valentine,
Paul Revere,
I got the horse right here.
Give me the dice and give me room. You've seen me roll for 100 G's, but I got a little more than dough riding on this one.
Happy birthday!
special and a peck. That lousy Joey Belmont!
That was the original cast of 1955's Guys and Dolls doing Fugue for Tin Horns, followed by a synth mashup called Guys and Dolls and Dubstep. For over 500 years, the familiar short form of the English name Dorothy has been a general term for a beloved feminine figure, doll. A baby, a mistress, a daughter, a friendly face on a dark night, much in the same way that Jonathan is shortened to Jack and then used in phrases like hit the road, Jack, or Jack of all trades. In the 17th century, doll was briefly an alternate term for a slattern or slut, but by the 18th century it had mutated into a term for a toy baby given to a child. Much in the same way that babe has an adult connotation that is oddly related to the same word used to describe an infant. Although I'm not saying that all babies are promiscuous harlots, there may be some connection between the way we focus our affection on a paramour and the way we parent a baby. A certain kind of intensity of eros, so to speak. By the 19th century, the term had mutated again to mean a person who was nice, pretty, possibly silly, not necessarily in a derogatory way, but also in the sense of colloquial etiquette, of being pleasantly superficial and non-serious in order to have nice interactions with people. This is what a doll was doing at that time. Few things, of course, are as unpleasant as a person who perpetually wants to make you understand how serious things are, and therefore a kind of playful superficiality is needed in order to make people feel comfortable, willing to listen, and open to each other, to reduce stress. The right kind of superficiality is therapeutic and attractive. Attractive surfaces, however, bring us back to the notion of the facade, the veneer, the exoskeleton, mohi. When surfaces are made to be attractive and also resemble a person, then we have dollification. This could happen on top of a real live person who dolls themselves up, or it could happen on top of a piece of plastic or a bit of sewn up and stuffed stitchery-doo. Sometimes the superficial cuteness or smile or big eyes or long lashes or manly mustache makes you feel like a real quality is being amplified and extended, and at other times it creeps you out because you think it hides a suspicious interior that does not resemble that outside. Maybe it angers you because it reminds you of your heart's desire and yet cannot provide that to you. Maybe it excites you because you want something attractive that is loaded with the ambiguous complexity and unpredictability of human beings. By the 20th century, the term doll was widely in use in North America, meaning to dress up, to make up, to pet, and to tend to, like brushing a doll's hair, putting its makeup on, getting it dressed, and then doing the same things to yourself. Today, of course, we know that Dolly the sheep was the first officially cloned animal and that Dolly Parton's original name was, oddly enough, Dolly Parton. That's her real name, although the concept of real name sounds pretty fake to me. Joss Whedon, originally famous for turning Buffy the Vampire Slayer into a hit TV show, created a cult sci-fi classic called The Dollhouse. In The Dollhouse, a variety of healthy young people, including Eliza Dushku, sign a mysterious contract. For several years, they agree to have other personalities downloaded into their brains. They are then rented out to people who need someone with a particular look and a particular personality. Maybe what you need is a tall, blonde safecracker or a skinny, black expert on the Peloponnesian Wars. What are you going to do, randomly search high and low, or just have one customized for you? At the end of the contract, dolls get their personalities re-downloaded and are sent home with adequate monies. Yet our hero, the main doll, Elijah Dushku, starts to glitch. She begins remembering things from her other personalities, a bit like how memories start showing up unpredictably from other programming scenarios in the recent remake of Westworld. Eliza Dushku is not the first doll to start regaining all of her multiple personalities. It happened to one previous dude called Alpha. He went crazy and escaped from the dollhouse, and now he's out there and Eliza's in here, and both of them are trying to live with thousands of other minds as their mind, mutating beyond human consciousness into some kind of pluralistic meta-mind if only they can stay alive and not go crazy. These men and women are called dolls, not because they are physically empty inside with merely a painted human veneer on the outside, but because they are metaphorically or psychologically hollow. There's an opening where their personality should be. They're attractive, commercially produced exteriors that resemble people but have their person part missing. Mohi, mohi, mohi. To quote Natasha Lyonne from Russian Dolls, life is like a box of timelines. I'm Layman Pascal, and you're listening to the Valley of the Dolls edition of the Cinematic Asylum on CILU 102.7 FM. Here's Mae West.
I'm gonna give you loving in the new year. I'm gonna love you in the new year. Oh yeah. And for the new year, I'm gonna stay away from temptation as long as temptation stays away from me. Yeah. Oh, and when I have to choose between two evils, I'm gonna pick the one I never tried before. I'm gonna give you loving in the new year. I'm gonna love you in the new year. Oh yeah. Oh, you know, next year I'm gonna keep a close check on my conscience. I can't have that bothering me. Oh, and I'm gonna have goodwill toward men. And the more men, the more I will. Oh, I'm gonna give you loving in the new year. I'm gonna love you in the new year. Oh yeah. I'm gonna give you loving in the new year. I'm gonna love you in the new year. Oh yeah. Happy New Year to you.
All I need is some sunshine. All I need. All I need is some sunshine. All I need. The siren call beyond the tree line, with another one for the caves, and in the tar beyond those birches is a spirit that I crave.
never watched you. You set that Viking ship ablaze. We reached the moon falls icy cauldron and found the spirit that I crave. Oh, I need some sunshine. Oh, I need. Oh, I need is some sunshine. Oh, I need.
That was Mae West and then Timber Timbre from the Russian Dolls soundtrack. Today we are nesting inside a set of Russian dolls with no real explanations. Is it a show or a simulation that you're listening to right now? A set of branching timelines, a multiverse, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence? Really, every show with time loops explores the loops that we're all caught in all the time. We know the seasons rotate, that we sleep and eat on circadian rhythms, and that our reproductive organs have quasi-monthly circuits, but we seldom take the time to chart our whole multidimensional self on a calendar with such thoroughness that we can see how predictable and repetitive we really are, with all our concerns, efforts, relationships, drives, needs, and attempts. Do you get emotionally uncertain about your parents every 39 days? Maybe. How would you possibly know? Maybe a computer assistant will help you with that in a few years. Until then, let's just be ambiguously terrified of the sheer number of life loops we might be stuck in and the sheer number of apparent decisions we keep on making that not only go nowhere but aren't really decisions at all. As Alan says of Natasha's date in the Series 1 finale of Russian Dolls, he's not a choice. He's the hole where a choice should be. Dolly dropped a dollop of doll into the dollhouse that she'd previously dropped a few dollars on. Hard to understand why, but she's a real doll. And speaking of dolls, here's Barbie Dreams by Nicki Minaj, or rather the instrumental version thereof.
CILU is sponsored in part by the students of Lakehead University, our listeners, and our sponsors. At this time, we would like to thank the following sponsors for their continuous support.
The Thunder Bay Country Market, keeping it local every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and every Wednesday from 3:30 to 6:30 year-round. Stop by and say hi to over 80 vendors who make it, bake it, and grow it in the Dove Building located on the CLE grounds. The Lakehead Unitarian Fellowship, an inclusive spiritual community promoting a compassionate, just, and sustainable world. Find them online at luf.ca, on Facebook, or 129 South Algoma, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Sensia Corporate Web Solutions. Log on to sensia.ca for information about locally owned and operated hosting, site creation, and more.
This time, they've really gone beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Kramer, if I'm going to live over there, you got to take some of this stuff out. I mean, this thing is really freaking me out. I feel like it's going to come to life in the middle of the night and kill me.
What, Mr. Marbles? He's harmless.
You heard the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls trailer, a clip from Seinfeld about a creepy doll called Mr. Marbles, and then Attic Stein's remix of the Child's Play theme. In the movie Child's Play, a notorious serial killer has his soul transferred into a doll named Chucky after a voodoo ritual in a last-ditch attempt to avoid going to hell. May we all be so lucky. Anyway, this franchise, Child's Play, made a lot of movie money and scared a lot of families who somehow already imagined that dolls might come to life in the night in their own homes, skittering around, performing malicious nocturnal acts of various kinds of evil. We all almost relate to that feeling of having to hold down a doll that's become animate and tear it to pieces while it writhes and bites us and escapes under the bed somewhere. Of course, that's ridiculous. And by 1998, the franchise had slipped from pure horror into horror comedy and suspenseful spoofery with movies like Bride of Chucky. Yet I imagine a new, more intense, even darker reboot is somehow waiting in the wings. What do children do with dolls? According to TV commercials, they mostly brush their hair, hug them, push them around in strollers and prams, set them up in doll houses, or possibly arrange them in the reenactment of a historical or cinematic battle scene. But we all suspect a secret shadow side where the boys are smashing G.I. Joe's head with a hammer and girls are staging Barbie rape scenes before melting their faces off and cutting all their hair. In reality, kids act out an enormous range of both realistic and unrealistic scenarios in the safe territory of the doll world. Probably a psychologically healthy thing to volunteer to experience partial versions of charged content and things that trigger us. It might build up our neuro-emotional resilience. All of what kids do all the time, really, is to play act things that might happen in adult life so they can draw conclusions, test fire their circuitry, and gain behavioral insight so they aren't overwhelmed if those things crop up later in their adult lives. Playing God can be good for you. Although no respectable theologian or mysticalist envisions God as a superperson exerting direct petty control over human dolls, but you get the idea. And are we human beings actually dolls? No, but we resemble dolls in certain respects. It's almost ironic since part of the definition of a doll is that it resembles us. Nevertheless, we are a bit doll-like. I mean, we have a human-like facade that might be attractive or creepy, and a lot of us are sort of hollow inside. I don't just mean sociopaths or politicians who have compromised their values one time too many until their soul finally caves in on itself. And I also don't just mean some philosophical pseudo-Buddhist scenario in which everything is ultimately empty because it can only be defined in relationship to other things and consists mostly of internal networks of empty space. No, I mean something more basic than any of those things. I mean that feeling that we aren't quite what we should be. That we're empty of our best selves most of the time. That when we face a crisis or face a lover or stand in front of our own actions that we aren't quite enough to handle it. We aren't quite fully embodying our own values. We aren't quite present enough in our presence, not quite together enough, not quite individual. That we can't even access all of our own intelligence and feelings. And how rarely are we in flow? How rarely do we perform optimally? How rarely do we even sense the insides of our own body or see the things that are right in front of us? In that respect, we are metaphorically like hollow dolls. Semblances of people, just as real as other people, sure, but other people might be a dangerously low standard to set for ourselves. From a TV show about humans or humanoid robots who might be dolls or might be people, here's Synthetic Humans from Humans. You heard Synthetic Humans from Humans. And then the theme song by J.P. Houston from the Canadian children's show Big Comfy Couch about Lunette and her doll Molly, who solve everyday problems on their big comfy couch. Molly sounds like a real doll's name, like Raggedy Ann or Raggedy Andy. And Molly looks like a doll. But what if she was smaller? Made of plastic, shaped like a soldier, shaped like Iron Man. Does a superhero action figure count as a doll? Because we associate dolling with girls, for some reason, we often dissociate this word from boys, although boys are as likely to want to play with artificial decorated objects and humanoid surfaces as anyone else. Once you admit that Ken is just as much of a doll as Barbie, it's less than half a step to G.I. Joe, Han Solo, and Spider-Man, especially if they come with a change of clothes. Does a marionette count? What if the strings are removed? I remember when I first saw the film Team America World Police. The opening scene was an old-school marionette, slightly interesting but mostly lame, and the camera holds on it just long enough for me to worry, and then it pulls out to reveal a world of much more interesting stringless dolls operating that first marionette. Decorated, manufactured, superficial humanoids, they definitely are. You could brush their hair and dress them up. So, face it, boys, you play with dolls.
I was sent from planet Zyron to conquer the Earth. I had a terrific plan, I thought it would work. Tried to get the Earthlings all to kill each other, you see. But it all went wrong and now I must decree. You are worthless, Alec Bowen, you are worthless, Alec Bowen. You failed in every way and now my stock in you has fallen. Your career is Darwin and you're worthless, Alec Bowen. That's why I blew your head off and your children are all boring. Planet Giron is inhabited with Zypods like me, but also with Balmacs who are giant beasts. The Zypods and the Balmacs are at constant war. So we wanted a new home, and that's what Earth was for. But you are worthless, Alec Bowen, you are worthless, Alec Bowen. You fucked up my whole plan, and now Giron is smeared with Balmac pollen. Your garbage needs some hoeing, and you're worthless, Alec Bowen. Now I must return home a failure. I'm afraid the pit of Cry Rock is calling.
You don't know
That was a couple of short tracks from the all-doll film, Team America World Police, followed by the Dollhouse main theme by Jonathan Brooke and Death of a Rock Star with Alec Mass from Russian Dolls. Tell me, does your soul get stolen every time someone takes a picture of you? Maybe. Your likeness becomes that of a mere surface. Where did your feeling of having someone or something inside you go in that mere surface? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we're just superstitious about representations. Would you watch a video of a child being killed? Probably not. I'm not sure I would. But what if you knew for a fact the entire thing had just been created digitally and was composed entirely of pixels and no real event had occurred at all? Would that make a difference? It ought to, logically, but our brains are wired in a weird way that makes us assume that depictions of things are something like real things. We react emotionally to representation. We treat photographs and audio recordings as evidence, even though we know they can be created artificially. We treat the news or alternative news as if it was likely to be true just because it was being reported. We react to words themselves as if they were racist or sexist or derogatory and often spend more time trying to get people to use different terminology than we do trying to solve actual social problems. It actually takes a lot of time and effort to start to distinguish between real things and the things that just remind us of things. Even a lot of professional wine tasters think a wine tastes better if it's more expensive and has a fancy label. They're professionals, and their brains still don't make a distinction between reality and that which reminds them of reality. I encourage you to embark upon the work of making such distinctions in yourself, and I'm sure you can understand from all of that why voodoo dolls are a thing. Voodoo dolls are these little dolls, these little artificially created decorations whose surfaces resemble a person, mohi, and they have been used by witches, priests, and dark shamans the world over to cause effects, apparently, they believe, on whomever the doll reminds them of. Maybe you put a little piece of the real person's hair on its head or dip it in some of their blood. It's sympathetic magic. It worked in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Why wouldn't it work in real life? In fact, I've got a small doll that looks a little bit like you, and I'm holding it in my hand right now, and I've also got this long, pointy needle. Should I stick it in? Well, maybe not, just to be safe. We're coming toward the end of our hour. We climbed down from our castle today in the mountains and traversed the Valley of the Dolls, and now we're up another mountain on the far side of that green pastoral valley, and who knows how we're going to get home now. Thanks to all our listeners on the planet Earth today, and a special thanks to Tiina Flaak for finally digging that moat around the station. With any luck, we'll find a little money in the budget to get those half-shark, half-alligators I keep recommending. Until then, or until next time, from all of us here at CILU and the Cinematic Asylum, good luck, Earth.
This time, they've really gone beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
CILU is sponsored in part by the students of Lakehead University, our listeners, and